That Glenda shared the story of common ground, because the truth of the matter is, every time we take a step in the direction of our bigger story or our bigger self, it has this ripple effect that moves out into the world and touches everyone and everything. So there's no act that we take that isn't significant, and I think that's really an important point here. I love what David Rico says. I'm going to be sharing something from his wonderful book, The 5 Things We Cannot Change. But he says, and this is kind of, I believe, if you look at the process that we're all in, he says that we are all in the process of human becoming. We're all in process. We're these incredible divine beings, but we're human beings too. And along the way, we always have an opportunity to step into this bigger version, like Glenda said, of ourselves, of who we really are. And the biggest version of ourself that we can demonstrate in the world is this divine self, this essence, this part of us that knows its radiance, the part of us that knows how to wear the halo all the time. That's really our biggest self. That's our biggest story of ourselves. But what I know is we're all in process. And sometimes things fall apart. Anything fall apart in your life? Glenda mentioned a couple of things in her own life. We've been on a journey together for many years, and things sometimes just fall apart. And when they fall apart, this is where we get to stretch. We actually get to stretch ourselves into those uncomfortable places where we have to call upon this quality of courage to see us through, this heart quality that reminds us of who we really are, that reminds us of our bigger self, not that vulnerable. That's why I picked this image of the little bird coming out of the egg. You know, sometimes it's a lot easier to stay defended, encased in that warm little egg of safety. And boy, I'll tell you what, especially in the beginning, when you take a courageous step, you're naked, you're vulnerable, you're fragile, you haven't quite got your legs yet, your wings are not too strong, and we are in the process of becoming through that experience, whatever that is. And I know for myself, and it's true for our experience here at Common Ground, we're right in the middle of breaking out of a new egg with our move to our new location. Every time we take a new step and move in a new direction and move out of our comfort zone, I love what Jean Houston says. She says, we don't know if we're ready to start something courageous until we actually start it. We can think about it, but we really don't know how to do it until we actually do it. And she says, our life begins at the edge of our comfort zone. I love that. Life begins at the edge of our comfort zone. Life begins when we peck the first hole in the eggshell and peep out through those, into the daylight and see what the big world's all about, so that we can then emerge and be our greatest self. I love that. She says it takes courage to be who we really are. Like Glenda mentioned about our own journey together. But I got to tell you, it took courage for us to be willing to move into a household with a sick and dying person, no money coming in, starting a new community. I mean, that took a lot of courage. Did we know how it was going to turn out? Absolutely not. In those early days, we had 7 of you there. You're still here, family, and people that came with us from our other community. But we had no idea that 9 years later, we'd be exploring the possibility of moving into what will become Orange County's destination sanctuary. Who knew? But you see, it's not that we went from that decision to leave that community to the decision to create the destination. We had a lot of courageous becomings in between there, a whole lot. And I think about my personal life. I think about the stories that I know from many of you. We are constantly in this process of transforming and evolving. moving to the edge of our comfort zone, breaking out of various places that scare us so that we can move into the next greatest demonstration of who we really are. And there's a part of us, just like that little bird, that knows how to peck its way out of that shell. There's a part of us that knows how to do this. There's a part of us deep within that is so connected to the divine that we know that we can make it through. We know if we peck a hole in that shell that we're going to pop out and we're going to go through some stages and phases, but that we know we're going to make it. This is where the courage resides. This is where the courage resides. Because the truth is, we do have all the answers within. We do have the answers. But when we are coming from a place of fear, we are not listening. When we're coming from a place of guardedness, and we've got, the earmuffs on and we're not listening because we're too frightened, we're not hearing the guidance that helps us remember that we know how to do what we came to do. We never intended to create a church. We never intended to create anything close to what Common Ground has become. That was never, a bottom line on a spreadsheet, ever. But there was something in our relationship together, in the energy of this spiritual community, and in the open-heartedness of all of us together that allowed us to work together to courageously create what we've got here. That's exactly the truth. And that's the way it works in your individual path also. So we have to be willing to say yes. Okay, unconditional yes. And we have to be responsible. I take responsibility for how my life shows up. I take responsibility for the choices that I make. I take responsibility for either being compassionate or not. I have to take responsibility for my highest self to show up being forgiving or not. All the qualities that I want to be in the world. I love it this year at Christmas Eve. My blessing for the year said, be peace. May you be peace. And I went, oh, thank goodness, it's so much better than the one I got the year before that was a struggle. May you be peace. But what I realize is it isn't just that may I be peace out there for everybody else. This is the trick. May I be peace. May I live the quality of peace within myself. And I got to tell you, that takes courage. It's a whole lot easier to get mad. It's a whole lot easier to just go through life being judgmental and angry and sort of non-forgiving. It's a lot easier. You got to really be mindful of every thought, every action, if you want to actually be peace in the world. The courage to be that. It's not easy. I thought it would be a piece of cake. Because, I know how to show up being peaceful. I know how to show up with you folks being peaceful. It's not always easy for me to be peaceful within. Does that make sense? Yeah. This is what it is when we talk about the courage to be. Glenda mentioned it's not just about guts, but it is about guts a little bit. It's about guts, it's about grit, and it's about grace. And it's about making the choices that allow us to take those courageous steps in a direction that might not be real familiar to us. We may have a pattern of anger. We may have a pattern of judgment. We may have a pattern of wanting always to be right. We may have a pattern of being judgmental and harsh. That may be part of our pattern. We're invited through this courage to be, to step into a new way of being, like Glenda said, a new way of being in our life experience. And this is the deal. Your life right now, the life you're living right this minute, this is how your life is now. This is a result of the choices that you've made now. This is the result of what you have chosen to be now. And I love what Jean Houston says. This is the threshold of what comes next. So if you are wanting to make some changes, if you're recognizing things are not working very well, if there are some areas where you need to stretch to break out of that shell, whatever that looks like, then that pushes you to the edge of your comfort zone. And that will allow you to move in a new direction of being. So how do we do this? How do we have the courage to be our best self, to be our highest self, to be our most radiant, most beautiful, light-filled being? How do we do that? First of all, we got to admit when we're afraid. We got to admit what holds us back. We have to know what that stuff is, be willing to take a look at it. You know, a lot of us are afraid of being afraid. We're afraid of being afraid. And when we're afraid of being afraid, what happens is we take all kinds of precautions in life. We start limiting ourselves. We start shrinking our life. You see, we take so many precautions because we're afraid of being afraid. Can't tell you how many of us are, no matter what our circumstances, do you know how many of us, and this is very common, how many of us are afraid of being homeless bag ladies? Afraid of, yeah, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because I know you've all shared your stories. I mean, there's part of me that's afraid of that. Down deep, maybe, yeah? So we have to be willing to admit where we're afraid. And most of it's just, we're afraid of, we have a fear. Hello, Robert. So most of the time, you know, we kind of go around walking on eggshells in life rather than breaking through the egg and creating something new for ourselves. So that's the first thing we got to do. We got to be able to be willing to look at where we're afraid. Own it. Then we've got to allow the feeling of fear to be present and acknowledge it. We've got to feel the feeling fully. Now here's the deal. Every feeling is valid. Feelings are valid. I don't care what your feeling is, it's valid. Now this is the trick, and please hear this. The story that is driving your fear and your feeling, now that requires some examination. The feeling itself is valid. What drives your fear and your feeling, better look at it. Especially if it's getting in your way, okay? That's what limits us, is the story that drives the feeling. And this is the other piece. Be very careful that as you're feeling your feelings, they don't go from a feeling into a big giant drama. See, that's what happens when you camp out. They go from a feeling of fear or a feeling of whatever, unworthiness, not enough, into this big drama, this story that then takes on a life of its own. So you've got to be very careful in giving yourself permission to feel your feelings. Yeah, I feel this. Okay, now I'm ready to move on. And then the other important piece of this is take action anyway. Move to the edge of your comfort zone. Make a decision to take responsibility, even if you're stretched into that place that is not very comfortable. Even if you're stretched beyond what you thought you could do. Even if you feel very naked like this baby bird. Even if your wings are barely formed. Even if your legs are wobbly. Take action anyway. Take some action anyway. Open to guidance. Allow yourself to be who you are. Say unconditionally, okay, yes, whatever is, I'm going to move in this direction of my dream, of my highest potential. Because if we're not willing to break out of that egg, we're never going to meet our grander self, a bigger story of who we are. And I know for a fact, because I know so many of your stories, there's not a person in this room that has not broken out of the egg multiple times in life. It's what we do. Because like David Rico says, we're all becoming human. We're all human becomings. So I'm going to close with, those of you who haven't used this material with David Rico might be interested in revisiting the rest of Tania. He has page after page after page of affirmations toward the end of the book. Because his idea is there are things in life that just happen. And we can actually get through life and have a happy life if we learn how to be with these things. So this is some of what he says. No matter what happens to me, I remain ever more grounded, unswayed by fear. The events in life and the actions of others impact me, but they don't paralyze me. I remain secure within myself. The next point is, I'm able to say ouch to pain in relationships and interactions with others. I take action to change what can be changed and to move on when things are too painful. I do this without self-pity or the need to make anybody else wrong. I love that. No blame, no shame, no guilt, no fault finding. I am happy to appear as I am, without pretense, and no matter how unflattering. I'm not faultless, but I am deeply committed to working on myself. Reminds me of the time when Fred was dying and things were very hard for us. I don't know, it was some special event. We both had our ministerial stoles on. I just was who I was. I had to blow my nose on my stole because I was so overcome with grief about Fred. And it's like, I don't care. This is who I am right now. I'm in deep pain, and I know that you're not going to fault me for having to wipe my nose on my ministerial stole because you know I'm in grief. That's what I'm talking about. Be who you are. Be your best self. Yeah, we've all got work to do. We're all becoming. We're all in process. So I remind you, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, whatever that is for you. Thank you for listening.